Bathing machines, the beach cabins of the 18th and 19th century. Back in the 18th and 19th centuries, a casual beach dip like we enjoy today wasn't an option. Instead, people used bathing machines, quirky, cabin-like carts on wheels. These contraptions were rolled down into the water, giving swimmers privacy to change and take a dip without prying eyes. To top it off, women's bathing machines were stationed far away from the men's, keeping things delightfully proper. Dresses for boys, a surprising fashion trend in history. From the 16th century to around 1920, it was completely normal for boys aged 4 to 8 in Europe to wear dresses. The main reason? The high cost of clothing. Dresses were much more practical for growing boys, as they didn't outgrow them as quickly as pants. This tradition even extended to royalty. Take Alexei, the son of Russian Emperor Nicholas II, for example. In the photo above, he looks perfectly happy and comfortable in a dress identical to those worn by his sisters. Who knew dresses had such a practical past? Two sleeps, one night, medieval Europe's sleep style. Back in the Middle Ages, Europeans had a unique sleep schedule known as segmented sleep. The first sleep kicked off at sunset and lasted until around midnight. Then, like clockwork, people would wake up for 2 to 3 hours. During this time, they'd pray, chat with family or neighbors, or just relax. Afterward, they'd dive into their second sleep, which lasted until sunrise. Using rocks as toilet paper, a throwback to ancient hygiene. Before the invention of that glorious creation we call toilet paper, people had to get creative with whatever was within arm's reach. Think leaves, corn cobs, coconut shells, sheep's wool, or cloth if you were fancy enough to afford it. The ancient Greeks? They went with stones and clay, but the Romans? Oh, they elevated communal hygiene to a whole new level. Their tool of choice? A sponge on a stick. After taking care of business, they'd rinse the sponge in a bucket of water, leaving it ready for the next user to share the experience. Now that's ancient recycling for you. Dirty hygiene. In some medieval countries, people believed that water was a source of disease, and lice were poetically dubbed the pearls of God. This belief was enthusiastically promoted by kings and quickly became the societal norm. Queen Isabella I of Castile took this to heart and was famously proud of bathing only twice in her entire life, once when she was born and again right before her wedding. Taking photos with the dead, a surprisingly creepy custom. It might sound spine-chilling today, but in the 19th century, this was a heartfelt way to preserve memories of departed loved ones. The deceased were carefully prepared, dressed in everyday clothes, with makeup applied and posed for family portraits. To add an eerie touch of realism, their eyes, if closed, were sometimes painted to look open, creating lifelike gazes, as seen in the example above. Smoking on airplanes, a blast from the past. About 50 to 60 years ago, smoking on airplanes was as normal as ordering a coffee in flight. Smokers would light up without a second thought, puffing away in full view of other passengers. Fast forward to today, and smoking on planes is banned in most countries. But in a few places, like Iran, this rule hasn't quite made it off the runway. Chopine shoes, Chopins, one of the oldest high-heeled shoes, were all the rage in the 16th century. During the Renaissance, they became a must-have for noble women who weren't just walking, they were towering. Despite being bulky and a little awkward, these women were determined to take their Chopins even higher, pushing the limits of a 1430 law that capped them at just 3 inches, 8 centimeters. Some pairs even soared over 20 inches, 50 centimeters. The taller the shoe, the more it screamed noble and set them apart from commoners. Plus, they made sure they didn't trip over their gowns or step into a puddle, keeping their royal step as flawless as ever. The cough cure that was actually heroin. Believe it or not, 100 years ago, heroin was considered a harmless alternative to morphine and was sold in pharmacies as a cough medicine. It was even recommended for kids. But then, people discovered that heroin turns into morphine in the liver, and by 1924, the method was banned. Still, in Germany, it was used all the way until 1971. Beauty through radiation. In the early 20th century, radiation was seen as a positive phenomenon, and many fraudsters jumped on the bandwagon to deceive people. They sold cosmetics, food, and drinks loaded with radium and thorium, radioactive souvenirs, and even devices designed to saturate water with radioactive elements. Sadly, many people paid the ultimate price for these deadly beauty products. Bloodletting, the cure-all that wasn't. For nearly 2,000 years right up until the early 20th century, bloodletting was the go-to treatment for just about anything that ailed you. Got a fever? Let's drain some blood. Feeling tired? Must be time to bleed it out. Unfortunately, this cure often did more harm than good. Not only did it fail to address the underlying illness, but it also left patients weaker and more vulnerable. Turns out, losing blood wasn't exactly the miracle fix they thought it was.